Picture a life in which every detail is meticulously planned, where each step taken is thoughtfully calculated, yet there remains an inexplicable void, regardless of one's efforts. This was the reality of Ethan Carter, a 6-year-old boy reliant on a wheelchair, whose world diminished with every day that passed. His father, John Whitmore, a prosperous businessman, was convinced that all Ethan required was control and protection. However, Ethan yearned for something deeper, a life that extended beyond the confines of his carefully crafted existence. Then, one day, an unexpected event unfolded. A girl, barefoot and disheveled, made her way into their garden. Sophie Martin, a girl without a home or family, entered Ethan's life, introducing a feeling he hadn't experienced in years: joy. With nothing more than a simple smile, Sophie made Ethan feel like a normal boy once again. She treated him in a way no one else had. And in that fleeting moment, everything shifted. But when John, driven by fear and a desire for control, pushed Sophie away, he inadvertently pushed his son into a silence that would take days to shatter. What transpires when a father learns that what he dreaded most was, in fact, the very thing his son needed? Witness John Whitmore grapple with the repercussions of his choices as he endeavors to right his wrongs before it's too late. Eager to see how it all transpires? Continue watching to discover what lies ahead. At 6 years old, Ethan Carter had never experienced life like the other children. His existence was one of precise control and quietude, where every action was calculated and every breath meticulously planned. Seated in his wheelchair beside the window, he would observe the world pass by, unable to partake in the exuberant laughter of other children playing outside. His father, John Whitmore, a highly successful entrepreneur, had created a life founded on safety and order around his son. Everything in their home was organized, predictable, and almost clinical. Yet, as Ethan gazed out at the sunlit garden, a sense of lack gnawed at him, something he couldn't quite articulate but felt profoundly. Ethan yearned to run, to laugh without restraint, to be liberated from the restrictions of his own body. He had resigned himself to the slow pace of his life. But at night, in the stillness of his room, he would close his eyes and dream of true movement. Unfortunately, those dreams always concluded with the harsh reality of his legs remaining motionless, his world still restricted to the confines of his house. And then, one afternoon, everything shifted. It began with a gentle rustling at the gate, barely audible, like a whisper in the breeze. Having grown accustomed to the silence that enveloped him and the stillness surrounding his wheelchair, Ethan never anticipated anything disrupting the monotony. Yet today felt different. Through a crack in the fence, she materialized, a girl no older than Ethan, with wild hair and bare feet. She seemed unfazed by the dirt on her clothes or how she appeared. A sense of freedom radiated from her, a wildness that Ethan couldn't fully grasp. "Hey," she greeted, her voice bright and unencumbered by hesitation. "Do you want to play?" Startled, Ethan blinked, uncertain how to reply. He had been met with pitying stares, ignored, or, worse, subjected to silence by everyone else. But this girl, she looked at him, truly looked, and asked if he wished to play, as if he were just another kid, merely another person. "Who are you?" was all Ethan could manage, his voice quavering with curiosity, his heart racing. "Sophie," she answered, shrugging with a grin that instantly made Ethan feel as though he'd known her for ages, despite their recent introduction. "I live just around the corner. I saw you through the window." For reasons he couldn't comprehend, Ethan found himself smiling back. Sophie didn't regard him with pity or concern. Instead, she appeared eager and even exhilarated. That day, they spent hours together. Sophie didn't view Ethan as a fragile boy requiring constant care. She whisked him around the garden in his wheelchair, laughing as they raced among the trees, the wind rushing past. After so long, Ethan felt a wave of joy that had long evaded him. True joy. Not the forced kind, but an authentic sense of happiness. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan laughed so hard his sides hurt. He hadn't felt this unencumbered in years. Sophie revealed to him something he never knew he craved, the ability to laugh freely, without concern for what others thought. It was a glimpse into what life could be if circumstances were different. Yet, as soon as Sophie left, the world fell silent once more. Ethan remained alone by the window, his heart still racing from their laughter and the bond they'd shared. Questions swirled in his mind. Why had Sophie entered his life? And why did it seem she was the only one who truly saw him? The following day, Sophie returned. She didn't knock or announce her presence. Instead, she climbed to the gap in the gate, her smile more radiant than ever. "I thought you might be bored," she remarked, plopping down on the grass next to him. "Want to race again?" Hours flew by as they played. Sophie invented games and recounted tales from her life, including how she'd once slept beneath a tree, how she'd never had a place to call her own. Sophie embodied wildness and a carefree spirit, unhindered by the world's restrictions. And for the very first time, Ethan felt alive. However, John's reaction was not one of approval. Observing from the window of his high-rise office, he watched Sophie run alongside Ethan's wheelchair, pushing him through the garden and laughing as though it were the most natural thing in the world. John's face tightened at the sight. Surprises were never to his liking, and this unexpected intrusion was beyond what he could handle. He stormed down to the garden, his footsteps echoing sharply on the marble floors. "Who are you?" John demanded, his voice icy, his eyes narrowing. Sophie froze, her eyes wide with fright for a moment before she took a step back. "I am Sophie. I was just playing with Ethan." Anger surged within John, but beneath it lay an unfamiliar feeling, perhaps fear. He had no knowledge of who this girl was, where she had come from, or why she felt so at ease with Ethan. The very thought of an outsider entering their carefully controlled existence made him uneasy. "You don't have permission to be here," John snapped, seizing Sophie by the arm. "Leave now." Sophie's expression darkened with rage, but she remained silent. She merely turned to Ethan, her gaze softening, before looking back toward the gate and walking out. Ethan's heart sank as he watched. He'd never seen his father this furious. It made him feel small and inconsequential. He wanted to call after Sophie, to assure her he was sorry, but the words lodged in his throat. Instead, he sat in silence, bearing the weight of his father's actions. The subsequent days were unlike any other. The house, once a haven of quiet, felt emptier than ever. Ethan retreated to his room, evading his father's efforts to engage. He refused to respond to John's questions or play the games suggested by his therapist. He no longer even glanced out the window. John was at a loss. The more he attempted to connect with Ethan, the more his son withdrew into himself. Unbeknownst to him, it wasn't the gifts or meticulously arranged routines that Ethan craved. It was Sophie, but John wouldn't grasp that until it was nearly too late. Days drifted by in a silent tempest of tension. John Whitmore's home, which had once radiated a sense of control, now felt like a cage to Ethan. His father's kindly intentions to lift his spirits fell flat. New toys, special treats, even his beloved meals. None of it held any value. Ethan no longer showed interest in anything. Even the minor joys that once comforted him elicited no response. He spoke little, barely moved, his eyes devoid of spark, as though the light within him had vanished the moment Sophie departed. John struggled to fathom the unfolding changes. He tried everything under the sun, bringing home a new train set with over 200 pieces, the type he believed would reignite Ethan's spirit. He arranged for their housekeeper to bake Ethan's favorite dessert, chocolate cake with extra frosting. When none of that managed to work, John hired a clown, believing humor would return Ethan to his former self. But nothing bore fruit. Ethan didn't even flinch. He merely stared out the window, his expression vacuous. John faced a loss of control, a scenario foreign to him. His life had been meticulously structured around precision and predictability. Everything had its designated place, and events unfolded for a reason. Yet, presently, he found himself trapped in his own home with a son who seemed to distance himself further each day. Nothing felt coherent. One evening, after an exceptionally awkward dinner where Ethan refused to eat and barely acknowledged his father's presence, John sat in front of Ethan. His face reflected fatigue from endless days filled with silence and failed attempts. "Ethan," he ventured softly, aiming to penetrate the wall of quiet. "What's going on? You've been so withdrawn. I don't understand." For a protracted moment, Ethan remained silent, fiddling with the sleeve of his shirt, creating tiny knots in the fabric, a habit born of nervousness. Eventually, Ethan spoke, his voice barely rising above a whisper. "It's that girl, Sophie." John's heart leaped. "What about her?" he inquired, trying to mask the anxiety creeping into his tone. For the first time in days, Ethan's eyes met his, and John could see something that nearly shattered him. Pain. Ethan's expression was hardened, yet behind the anger was a sorrow, an abandonment that John could never have anticipated. "She doesn't pity me," Ethan insisted, his voice slightly trembling. "She doesn't view me as broken. She doesn't see the wheelchair. She just makes me laugh." John's breath hitched in his throat. "Ethan, why do you care about that girl? She's not like us. She's different. She isn't someone we should have around." Ethan's hands clenched into fists around his shirt. "You don't get it," he whispered, tears brimming in his eyes. "You don't understand how it feels to have someone treat you like you're just a kid, someone not to be fixed, not someone to be pitied." The words struck harder than John expected. He believed he was protecting Ethan. Sophie represented an unknown variable, an outsider to their meticulously crafted world. But in Ethan's eyes, Sophie was a beacon amid darkness. She had treated him as a person, not an invalid. Stunned by the gravity of his son's words, John sat back in his chair. "I'm sorry," he finally said, though the words carried a hollow weight. "I just wanted to keep you safe." Ethan's gaze softened momentarily before he turned away. "She made me forget about the chair. She made me feel normal, even if only for a brief moment." John was at a loss for how to respond. His mind raced, processing Ethan's words as guilt crept in. Had he been so fixated on control that he neglected what his son genuinely needed? Had his fear of allowing anyone into their structured life led him to deny Ethan the one thing he desired most, freedom? The next few days slipped by in a haze. Ethan remained locked in the silence of his own making. While John couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at him, Sophie had entered their lives and shown Ethan something John couldn't. The experience of truly living without the fear of judgment. Yet John had sent her away, and now it felt too late. Darker thoughts consumed him with each passing day. He'd always held that safety and control were the keys to a fulfilling life. But what if he was mistaken? What if Sophie wasn't a threat? What if, in his longing to protect, he had broken the sole connection Ethan had left? That evening, after pacing the house for the better part of the day, John could no longer tolerate the silence. He could not let his son slip back into that darkness. He had to find Sophie. He marched to the building security desk, his tone resolute. "I need access to the footage from the past week. I want to know who has been entering the garden." The guard, taken aback yet compliant, responded, "Of course, Mr. Whitmore." Minutes of rewinding footage elapsed before Sophie appeared on the screen. Barefoot, crossing the gap in the fence, and heading straight toward Ethan. John observed them play, laugh, and share stories, just as he had witnessed from his office window. Life brimmed in that garden, something he denied for far too long. His hands shook as he watched the footage. For the first time, he recognized that Sophie was the one who had returned Ethan to life. She had done what no amount of therapy or expensive toys could achieve. She had afforded Ethan the chance to feel like a normal boy again, and he had squandered it. The next morning, John navigated through the streets of Los Angeles, his mind a whirlwind of regret and determination. He could not continue to run from this reality. He had to set things right. Unsure of how he would explain when he found Sophie, he understood one undeniable truth. He needed to find her, and he needed to apologize for Ethan's sake. Thank you for watching. We apologize for the interruption, but we ask for your help in enhancing our future content. Have you ever realized you pushed someone away who was precisely what you needed? What led you to understand that? What would you do to make things right if given a chance? Share your experiences below. I'm eager to hear your stories. As John drove through the streets of Los Angeles, he felt a purpose he hadn't experienced in years. His grip on the wheel was tight, his mind focused, and his heart burdened with remorse. He had dedicated so much of his life to building walls around his son for protection. Now, he understood that it was the walls themselves that had stifled Ethan's ability to live. John had spent days lamenting his decision to dismiss Sophie, wondering if it was already too late. But upon reviewing the footage, seeing Ethan laugh and play like any other child, something shifted within him. He had been mistaken. Sophie was not a threat to Ethan. She was the very thing that had revitalized him. The day was sweltering, and the streets felt unusually congested. Driving up to a narrow street close to the restaurant where he had last seen Sophie, John parked and stepped out, his heart racing as he approached the alley where the garbage bin stood. He halted before the bins, scanning the surroundings in search of Sophie. The sun bore down upon him, the heat nearly unbearable. Just as he began to lose hope, he heard a soft rustle behind him. Turning quickly, he spotted Sophie, her messy hair, oversized jacket, and groceries in hand. She froze in shock at the sight of him. Her eyes widened, changing her gaze to the ground. She appeared ready to flee, but John stepped forward, voice steady yet calm. "Wait," he called, extending his hands to show he posed no threat. Sophie hesitated, scrutinizing him with suspicion, but slowly began to lower her defenses. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice low yet firm. "I've been a fool," John confessed, words tumbling out in a rush. "I pushed you away. I was afraid, and I failed to see how you were helping my son. Ethan has changed since you left. He's been quiet, and I can't resolve that with money or toys." He caught himself, realizing how desperate he sounded. "I need you to return. I need you to help him." Sophie regarded him thoughtfully, her eyes filled with confusion, anger, and something else, hope. It was the type of look someone gives when they have faced disappointment for so long, yet still hold a glimmer of belief that things might improve. "I don't have a home," she replied softly, her voice wavering. "I don't even have a place to stay. I can't simply walk back into your perfect life and act like everything's fine." John's heart ached at her words. He could sense the weight of her struggles, the hardship she endured. Yet something deep within him prompted him to step up. "You do have a place with us," he assured her, his tone earnest. "You'll always have a home with us. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking you to give Ethan the chance he desperately needs. He requires you." Tears brimmed in Sophie's eyes. "I don't belong there," she whispered. "I don't belong anywhere." John took a step closer. "You belong with us. Ethan needs you, and I need you. We all need each other." A lengthy silence enveloped him as Sophie stood there, her shoulders sagging on the burden of her past. At last, she nodded, a tear tracing down her cheek. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll return for him." John breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you," he replied quietly. Emotion thickened his voice. "You won't regret it." That afternoon, John drove Sophie back to his home. Upon entering, he found Ethan sitting by the window, gazing out into the garden. Ethan's face lit up at the sight of Sophie, for the first time in days. A genuine smile, a real smile, rather than a forced one, graced his face. Sophie approached him, kneeling beside him and taking his hand. "Do you want to go outside again?" she asked softly. Ethan eagerly nodded, his eyes gleaming with excitement. For the first time in ages, he didn't think about his wheelchair or his limitations. All he wanted was to be with Sophie, to play, and to truly live. As Sophie pushed his wheelchair through the garden, John observed from the doorway, witnessing the joy in Ethan's eyes, a connection that signified a shift within him. He had spent years striving to control every aspect of his life, but had been blind to what Ethan genuinely required. It wasn't additional toys or structured routines. It was Sophie. It was the liberty to laugh, to embrace childhood, and to feel normal even in extraordinary circumstances. Later that evening, as they gathered for dinner, An atmosphere of comfort permeated the space, absent until now. Sophie ate quietly but periodically glanced at Ethan, who chatted about new games he wanted to try. John watched, a warmth flooding his chest that he hadn't realized was missing. However, just as he believed everything was falling into place, the doorbell rang. John opened it to find a social worker standing at the threshold. "Mr. Whitmore," the woman inquired, her expression neutral. "I'm here regarding the case of Sophie Martin. We've received notice from a distant relative claiming to be her next of kin. She's filed for custody." A chill shot through John. This wasn't something he anticipated. Sophie was now more than part of their family. She was his daughter at heart. He wasn't ready to lose her. The ensuing days passed in a chaotic blur of meetings with lawyers and social workers. John fought fiercely for Sophie's place within their family. It wasn't about blood relations or legal documents. It was about love, a bond no court could sever. After what felt like a prolonged struggle, the decision was finally announced. John received a phone call while at the office. The judge ruled in his favor. Sophie could stay. She was officially part of the Whitmore family. That evening, as they sat together in the living room, John turned to Sophie, his heart swelling. "You're ours, Sophie, no matter what anyone else may say." Sophie's face brightened with pure joy. "I'm home," she whispered, emotion thick in her voice. "I'm really home." At that moment, John experienced a feeling of completeness he hadn't known in years. What do you think of John's choice to welcome Sophie back into their lives? Do you believe someone can genuinely change and make amends after a blunder? Share your thoughts with us. Do you think love can triumph over the past? If you enjoyed the story, drop the number 100 in the comments below and let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear a tale of second chances.